Revenge with Karen.
You should really smile more during demos. You look like a librarian who just smelled a fart. That was my first introduction to Tyler, the CEO's son, freshly unboxed from Wharton, and already walking around like he was about to be knighted for disrupting staplers. He said that to me while eating a protein bar shaped like a doorstop, standing in front of the architecture I spent 6 years building from the ground up. 6 years of caffeine-induced insomnia, patching vulnerabilities while half the office was at Coachella or some other corporate-sanctioned bacchanalia. 6 years of duct-taping compliance requirements to real-time encryption and making it dance without ever once crashing. And now here was this smug baby MBA calling me tech support in a cardigan because I dared to wear wool in August. They'd asked me to sit in on the investor pitch prep, not present, mind you. Sit. Observe. Smile politely while Tyler mispronounced the very terms I coined and confused AES with AI like he was reading from a bad chatbot script. Apparently, I was too intense to face the investors. You know how engineers get, the COO muttered to HR once, thinking I was out of earshot. Brilliant, but weird. Yeah, well, your wife's hairdresser uses my password manager. Small world, but here's the funny part. For all the posturing, the private jets, motivational Slack messages about synergy, none of them ever looked at the code-based metadata. None of them knew that buried deep in that system, the one they're now trying to sell for neat $90 million, was a heartbeat signature. Mine. A heartbeat the system checks every time it boots. Not biometric, not retinal, not fingerprint. Mine. And if that heartbeat disappears for more than 48 hours, the encryption key fragments. Irreversibly. I didn't do that out of spite. I did it because they refused to pay for a second security engineer. Look, I'm not bitter. I'm not some vengeful genius hiding behind horn-rimmed glasses and trauma. I just got tired of being the only person in the room who could tell the difference between a network breach and someone opening too many tabs. I made something airtight. They ignored it because I drink instant coffee and wear Payless loafers. Joke's on them. Shoes don't squeak when you walk into a boardroom uninvited. And speaking of ignoring things, if you've made it this far and haven't hit the subscribe button, what are you doing? You're already deep in the weeds with me. Might as well make it official. Go ahead, subscribe. It keeps this story engine running smoother than Tyler's gelled hair after a midday ego boost. Really helps the team keep the Marlboros lit and the microphones hot. Anyway, after Tyler's fart joke and his PowerPoint tantrum, I was told I'd be handling the back-end prep for the investor pitch. In English, that meant I'd be making sure nothing exploded while he demoed software he couldn't spell. He handed me a checklist that looked like it was written by ChatGPT after 3 cocktails. Make encryption work good. Remove bugs. Ensure seamless synergetic output. I think he thought if he used enough buzzwords, the server would just smile and comply. I said nothing. I took the list, I nodded. Then I went back to my desk and did what I always do when men like Tyler start puffing their chests, silently prep the tripwire. There's a line between being humble and being invisible. I walked that line every day. No title inflation, no stock options, no glossy awards. Just me, my keyboard, a heartbeat signature hidden 3 layers deep in a system they couldn't rebuild if they tried. But let them try. Please. I'd love to see Tyler explain to the investors why the core authentication suddenly defaults to a null string if I get terminated. So yeah, I prepped for the pitch. I even cleaned the sandbox logs and made sure the load balancer wouldn't choke when they clicked run simulation. But I also did something else. I tethered my heartbeat check to a passive monitor, my knockoff smartwatch. Not for security, for insurance. If I get cut off, the system alerts the investor. No fireworks, no alarm bells. Just a soft little message, encrypted and sent to one inbox. One person, one question. Who owns this code? And if they ask me directly, if they have the nerve to finally ask, I'll tell them, calmly. Smiling like a librarian who just finished reading their obituary aloud. I do. The first real crack in the dam came during a Thursday prep meeting, 2 days before the pitch. Tyler rolled in late, reeking of mint vape and startup desperation, and plopped into the chair like gravity owed him something. He looked around, smirked at the assembled team, marketing, finance, one guy from DevOps who hadn't blinked since 2019, and then looked at me like I was the janitor who'd overstayed her welcome. Margaret, he said, drawing out the syllables like my name was a nuisance he had to wipe off his shoe. We've decided you won't be in the room for the demo. Investors want clean lines, young energy. Not backend vibes, backend vibes. I looked up from my notes. You mean the system I built from scratch? The one we're selling? The one with 5 active compliance certifications tied to my name. He waved me off with a chuckle, like I was an elderly aunt worried about microwave radiation. It's all in the deck. You've done great work, really. But let the suits talk now. This is the big leagues, I could have responded. Could have listed the 14 separate regulatory checkpoints that had my name stamped on them like a cursed signature. Could have pulled up the multi-jurisdictional clause that said only a certified architect could demo live encryption for cross-border investors. Instead, I stared at his $400 haircut and thought, this is how systems fail. One smug haircut at a time. He kept talking. We'll be demoing a simulation environment anyway. What could possibly go wrong? That was the moment. That's when I felt the shift, not panic, not even anger. Just that deep, bone-level click that happens when you stop hoping they'll see your worth and start documenting their downfall. I went back to my office and closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. Then I pulled up the root-level settings panel. It was a hidden utility, one of the many I'd embedded in the system over the years, partly for efficiency, mostly because I never trusted the clowns upstairs to keep their fingers off the detonator. From there, I activated lattice mode. That's not its real name, of course. I just liked how it sounded. Lattice mode doesn't break anything, doesn't alter functionality, or make the system hiccup. It just watches. It logs every unauthorized access attempt to restricted modules, every falsified credential, every click into something they never should have touched. Then it routes the data, encrypted, compartmentalized, signed, to a private server only I control. The cherry on top, a mirrored alert sent silently to my smartwatch, dressed up as a generic health notification. So when Tyler, or whatever intern he weaponized, tried to bypass the authentication layer during the demo, I wouldn't need to be there. My wrist would buzz like a mosquito at a barbecue. I'd know, the fools have officially opened the wrong drawer. I don't get mad. I get methodical. To be clear, I warned him. I walked straight back into the glass box they call a war room, past the catered sushi and the vision boards that looked like Pinterest had a seizure, and I told him, Tyler, you're planning to demo a compliance-bound encryption tool without the licensed architect present. If you touch anything under Layer 3 without my handoff key, you're exposing the company to federal penalties. And if you simulate authentication with dummy data, that's falsification. He blinked at me like I was speaking binary. Margaret, no one's going to arrest us for showing a prototype. Chill. Go take a nap or something. Go take a nap. I turned and walked out before I said something career-ending. Not for me, for him. That night, I added one more rule to the monitor. If the system registers more than 3 failed access attempts to the credential vault, it sends a silent ping to one additional address. The legal team of our lead investor. Just a contingency. Insurance. Like buckling your seatbelt before the wreck. By Friday morning, they'd already begun rehearsing without me. I walked past the boardroom and saw Tyler standing in front of the screen, gesturing with all the subtlety of a mime on meth. I paused just long enough to watch him stumble over the word decentralized before my wrist buzzed. 1 failed access attempt. I smiled, then kept walking. The rumor hit like black mold, slow, silent, and spreading through the drywall while everyone pretended it was just a weird smell. It started with one of those fake casual check-ins. Hey, just wondering, is Margaret okay? Then came the sudden drop in invites, no more all hands, no calendar pings, not even a Slack reaction when I posted that the load test passed at 400% projected demand. Next, a project manager, new, too young to know better, slid up to me by the espresso machine and said, just between us girls, do you ever worry you're like too siloed? I looked her dead in the eye and said no. I worry you're not siloed enough. She blinked, laughed nervously, and scurried off like I'd coughed up a bat. By Tuesday, someone from HR accidentally sent me a calendar invite to a performance review that didn't include me on the panel. I opened it out of curiosity and found the words not team-oriented, rigid, and my personal favorite, highly replaceable post-funding. Bold of them to put that in writing. Even bolder to think I wouldn't see it. That afternoon, I logged in to prep for a routine stability check. My admin access was gone, not downgraded, gone. Just a red banner across the dashboard. Insufficient permissions. No warning, no explanation. Just silence where my control had always been. I sat still for 5 full minutes, not angry, not sad, just still. Then I picked up my jacket and took a walk 5 blocks down, past the glass buildings and food trucks, to a narrow brownstone that still had a buzzer instead of a facial recognition camera. I rang once. A second later, gravelly voice called out from inside. If it's about funding, I already gave at the blood bank. It's Margaret, I said. The door opened. Abe was the last original co-founder, still technically on paper. The others had cashed out, burned out, or married someone with a yoga apparel line. Abe, though, he'd been the one to hire me. He was the one who read my original spec sheet and said, "This is dangerous, I like it." His office hadn't changed, still smelled like old solder and cheaper cigars. He poured coffee into a chipped mug that said root access is my love language and motioned for me to sit. "They're icing you out," he said without needing to ask. They pulled my access. He grunted, "Rookies?" I didn't explain. I just asked one question, is the clause still valid? He didn't answer at first. Just turned to the dusty bookshelf, reached behind a copy of Hacking for Dummies, pulled out a thick black binder with a dog-eared post-it that read, "In case of idiots." He flipped to the page, showed me the paragraph, highlighted, underlined, initialed. Clause 14b, any architecture authored and deployed under private contract, not explicitly transferred via written release, remains the sole property of the developer. No retroactive claim applies. I stared at it. "You never signed it over," Abe said. I always wondered if that was on purpose. It was. Nodded like he'd just confirmed a weather forecast. Then let em burn. I thanked him. I left. And somewhere between that brownstone and the cold marble lobby of my office building, the sting of betrayal melted into clarity. They weren't just cutting me out, they were trying to ghostwrite the ending of my story, thinking I wouldn't have a backup draft. They didn't realize the story was mine to begin with. They thought the code was company property. They didn't know was that the foundational logic, the true engine behind the encryption, was built using a framework I designed years before I ever joined the company. A framework I never registered under their banner. A framework that, on paper, still lived under my name, under a private LLC I'd quietly formed the same week I took the job. They assumed I was just a coder with good aim. But I was the copyright holder of the language they'd been shouting in. Let them rehearse. Let them polish their pitches and polish each other's egos. Let them rewrite the org chart and redraw the seating plan. When the lights go out, they'll realize the only person who can flip the breaker is the one they just ghosted. Investor Day smelled like money and panic sweat. The conference room had been gutted and rebuilt with temporary LED panels and branded step-and repeats, like someone was trying to launch a hedge fund on the set of a game show. The coffee was artisanal, the pastries had names, and the interns were handing out brochures that looked like they'd been printed with angel tears. They sat me in the back. No name tag, no introduction. Just a plastic folding chair with a view of the exit sign. Tyler, naturally, was center stage, flanked by 2 executives who looked like they'd been printed from the same smug template. His tie was too tight, his smile too wide, his confidence too loud for someone whose demo had failed 3 times in the past week behind closed doors. He opened with a joke, something about firewalls and fire drills. It landed like a thud in a morgue. But no one cared. They were all too busy eyeing the slides behind him. Glowing graphs, product renderings, charts that bent up and to the right like salvation itself. Tyler could have said the system ran on hamster wheels and cheap vodka, and they would have clapped, because the room was thick with anticipation. $90 million was in the air. Then he hit the encryption demo. The system purred, fast and fluid, responding to commands like it was reading minds. A few VCs exchanged impressed glances. One even murmured, "This is elegant." I didn't blink. They had no idea they were looking at a hollow puppet. A working illusion, sure, but an illusion nonetheless. They were watching was a rehearsed loop inside a sandboxed clone of the architecture, running clean only because I'd stripped out the deeper verification layers. If they'd tried to stress test it, crack it open for scaling or regulatory use, the whole thing would have spit out an error code and a soft little message. Contact original architect for access rights. Tyler didn't know that. He was too busy riding the sugar high of applause. Then came the voice. It belonged to a woman. Mid-40s, crisp suit, ice blue nails that probably cost more than my car's timing belt. She was introduced earlier as VP of Strategic Infrastructure. Translation, the one who actually reads the fine print. She raised one eyebrow and asked, like she was ordering a coffee, who owns the underlying encryption framework. Tyler blinked. stuttered for just half a second. Then he smiled. Company property, of course, all developed in-house. The room nodded. Pens moved, tablets tapped. The lie floated out like a helium balloon, confident, bright, and stupid. And then buzz. My smartwatch vibrated. It was subtle. No one saw, no one cared, but I looked down anyway, just once. One new voice message, encrypted, authenticated. Sender, investors at Archon.com timestamp, real time. I tapped to play in the tiniest whisper of volume. A voice, refined, skeptical, came through. Margaret, we're told the architecture is yours. Is the encryption your personal IP? I stared at the screen, my own reflection in the glass. Calm, tired, unshaken. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I slipped the watch beneath my sleeve and crossed my legs. In the front, Tyler was spinning some garbage metaphor about how the code was like a trust fall in the cloud. Someone actually clapped. I leaned back in my folding chair and watched him paint his masterpiece of nonsense, every stroke sealing his fate. Because now the investors knew. Now they were asking me directly. And the best part, they hadn't even seen the clause yet. Tyler caught me before I could leave the building, all synthetic charm and glossy teeth, standing like a sales rep who just upsold a pensioner on an NFT course. Blocked the hallway with the confidence of a man who's never been told no by anyone who wasn't paid to say it. Behind him, the investors were still shaking hands and complimenting the kombucha bar. The smell of fake citrus and real arrogance clung to the air. Margaret, he said, voice dipped in fake warmth, quick chat. I didn't answer. Just stared at the red folder tucked under his arm like a party favor from hell. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators. Dad says you're terminated, effective immediately. He smiled like it was a reward. Nothing personal, just time to streamline things. You know how it is. Oh, I knew, you've done great work. But now that the system's proven, we need to scale without dependencies. He said that last word with a little pause, like he thought it might be too technical for me. Then he slid the red folder into my hands. There's your severance check. Be generous, honestly, and the NDA. Just your standard, don't ruin our fundraising language. Legal says you'll want to sign today so we can move forward clean. He tapped the folder like a waiter setting down a lukewarm steak. I opened it slowly, not out of confusion, just timing. Inside, a check for $12,000. The price of silence, apparently, and a 4-page document that boiled down to one command, disappear. He watched me read it, waiting for a crack in my expression. I gave him nothing. I closed the folder, then nodded. Okay, I said softly. Okay, he blinked, caught off guard by how easy that was. I nodded again, I understand. His shoulders dropped, victory already oozing from his pores. I turned away, walked back down the hallway past the reception desk, the glass-walled meeting rooms, the little shelf with fake awards they printed themselves. My heels echoed faintly against the tile. In the elevator, opened my smartwatch interface. No hesitation, no dramatics, just one flick of my finger. Trigger, ownership challenge active. The screen flashed once. A small icon blinked green. A quiet ping confirmed the signal was sent. The legal timestamp, the IP registration certificate, the clause scans, all precompiled and uploaded to the investor's audit node the moment my employment status was flagged as terminated. No sirens, no emails, no confrontation, just a clean rupture. The kind that doesn't bleed until it's too late to suture. The kind that lawyers don't see coming until it's already inside the firewall. By the time I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sky had turned slate gray. Rain smelled close. Thunder rumbled like distant applause. I kept walking. Tyler thought he had erased me. Thought he'd pinned the last butterfly to the board, labeled it, and moved on. But he didn't know I was the one holding the scalpel. Didn't see the silent ink under the glossy pitch. Didn't know the encryption engine had a legal tripwire tied not to the code, but to me. And now, every investor in that room, every executive on that call, was about to receive the same quiet packet, chain of ownership disputed. Licensing invalid without original architect's release. Tyler would hear about it in roughly 10 minutes. Dad would hear 5 minutes after that. And by the time they called a meeting, realized something they'd never even thought to check. I never signed over the soul of their shiny new system, because I am the system, and I just revoked their access. The first ripple came before I finished my coffee. It was early, too early for anyone from the C-suite to be active unless something had gone nuclear. My phone lit up with a call from an unlisted number, which I let ring once out of spite before answering. A clipped voice on the line, Margaret, this is Jenna from legal. Stirred cream into my mug, slow and deliberate. Hi, Jenna. There was a pause, a rustling of papers. Someone muttering in the background, probably Tyler, hyperventilating into a branded hoodie. We're trying to clarify something. The investors they've temporarily halted negotiations. They're requesting documentation regarding the ownership of the encryption framework. I'm sure it's just a formality. You understand, they just need peace of mind. Peace of mind. Do you have any documentation? Jenna continued, her voice tightening, that would suggest the architecture isn't wholly owned by the company. I sipped. Yes, another pause, longer this time. You could almost hear her trying not to swear. Would you be willing to upload that? I already did, I said. 14 minutes ago. Time-stamped, encrypted, certified. You'll see a voice file and attached clause documentation. If your inbox isn't melting yet, it will be. Hung up before she could finish her polite stammer. Across the city, across time zones, across network tunnels lined with NDAs and optimism, the trap had begun to snap shut. From what I heard later, the investors' team reacted fast. They didn't panic, they escalated, pulled their negotiators, froze their data room, issued a formal inquiry about IP chain of custody, and requested a full compliance audit within the hour. The CEO, been sunning himself in the warm glow of Tyler's overconfident pitch, reportedly went ghost pale during a mid-morning strategy call and demanded an emergency meeting with legal, ops, and that encryption woman. Except I didn't work there anymore. They'd made sure of that. Tyler, meanwhile, apparently tried to spin the whole thing as a simple miscommunication, some email that had slipped through the cracks, some clause they thought had been handled. But investors don't like cracks. They like signatures. They like clean transfers of intellectual property. And they really don't like discovering mid-deal that the crown jewel of your architecture is tethered to someone you fired 18 hours ago. By noon, I had 6 missed calls, 3 emails marked urgent, and a polite knock at the door of my apartment from a courier holding a printed letter on company letterhead, inviting me back for a clarification session with the executive team. Didn't open the letter, just let it sit there, a relic of a dying regime. Instead, I opened the encrypted archive on my drive, one I'd labeled for when they get stupid. Inside was everything, the development history of the framework, the emails Abe and I exchanged about Clause 14b, the voice message from the investor asking if the encryption belonged to me, and my calm reply, it does. The metadata on the file, ironclad, location tagged, time-stamped, signed with my private key, locked with a second one that only the investors' team could open. I uploaded it to the legal folder they'd shared in desperation. Watched the progress bar tick forward like a countdown to judgment. 30 seconds later, the read receipt came through. Another 30 seconds and my phone buzzed again. New message. Unknown number. Just one line, we need to talk. Please. I stared at it. Thought about all the times I'd fixed a bug at 2 a.m. while Tyler was at networking mixers. Thought about the Friday afternoons I'd been asked to keep it running while they went golfing with board members who still thought blockchain was a skincare product. Then I did what any reasonable architect would do. I turned off my phone, and I poured another cup. The boardroom looked like a battlefield dressed in business casual. Half the board was already there, flanked by legal counsel, who looked like they'd slept in their suits. Someone had rolled in a whiteboard and scrawled out a frantic timeline of assumed IP transfer, complete with question marks and red arrows pointing to Margaret, like I was a hurricane on a weather map. Tyler stood near the head of the table, sleeves rolled to his elbows in that performative crisis leadership way, pacing like he'd been rehearsing a TED talk on damage control. His voice, was told later, had started climbing the longer the meeting dragged on without me. Words like disgruntled, misinterpreted, and easily fixed were tossed around like duct tape on a sinking ship. I let them spiral. I let them stew in the silence of my absence. And then, 28 minutes past the hour, I walked in. No fanfare. No lawyer flanking me. Just me, a manila folder under my arm, and the quiet click of my shoes against their panic-polished floor. Tyler stopped mid-sentence. His eyes flicked to me, then to the CEO, his father, whose face had the strained, blotchy tone of someone learning the sunburn he thought he earned was actually radiation. Margaret, Tyler said, forcing a smile that died halfway across his face, we didn't think you were coming. I'm not here to stay, I said, placing the folder gently at the center of the table like I was setting down a verdict. Just here to correct the narrative. Someone from legal cleared their throat. We've reviewed your documentation. There's ambiguity in the way the architecture was handled. There's no ambiguity, I interrupted, calm as a sniper. There's clause 14b. I opened the folder. Inside, one page, printed, highlighted, signed by the original co-founder, countersigned by me, dated, filed, notarized. Unassigned IP remains sole property of the developer, I read aloud. No retroactive claim applies. No one spoke. I let the silence sit like wet concrete, heavy and setting fast. Without my release, I continued, you cannot sell, license, demo, or scale the encryption framework. Doing so constitutes breach of contract, IP theft, and potential securities fraud if misrepresented during negotiations. Tyler opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She was just a coder, he muttered, half to himself. Just the back-end lead, the CFO coughed. IP filing is hers. It predates our involvement. Tyler turned to his father, whispering something frantic. The CEO didn't move, just stared at the clause like it had personally insulted his golf handicap. Margaret, the board chair said, trying to bring dignity back into the room, what would it take to resolve this amicably? I leaned forward, resting my palms on the table. You fired me. You locked me out. You called me redundant. I tapped the page. It says otherwise. Another silence, deeper now, sinking into the bones of the building. Behind me, the door clicked shut. Security, maybe, or just the weight of consequences finally closing in. Tyler was pale now. His father no longer looked at me, just stared out the window as if the parking lot might offer salvation. You have two options, I said. Rebuild from scratch, which will take 2 years, 4 lawsuits. The collapse of your funding round, I slid a second sheet across the table. A printed invoice, or license the framework from me. The number on the paper was clean, not cruel, just accurate. A silence passed. Someone exhaled like they'd been underwater. I'll give you until tomorrow at noon. I picked up the original clause and slipped it back into the folder. After that, I negotiate directly with the investor. Then I turned, walked out the door I'd once been escorted through. This time, no one followed. I didn't wait until noon. By 9:04 a.m., I was already on a video call with the investor's core team. No middlemen, no company handlers, no Tyler in a slim-fit blazer interrupting to explain acronyms he didn't understand. Just me, a black turtleneck, and a fresh cup of coffee, staring down 3 people in suits so expensive they made my thrifted bookshelf look like evidence in a tax fraud case. Let's get straight to it, said the lead partner, folding her hands like she was about to negotiate a hostage release. You created the framework. I did. You retained ownership through an unassigned IP clause. Yes, and you never signed it over to the company? No, they never even asked. She nodded once like she appreciated the efficiency. Then she asked the real question. Do we still have a path to license the architecture? Not through them, I said, but through me. Absolutely. Dropped a PDF into the shared drive. Terms, licensing tiers, maintenance schedule, one-time buyout option if they wanted exclusivity. The partner clicked through it. Her brows barely moved. We were prepared to invest $90 million, she said. This contract puts you at a little over 110. Yes, I replied, a long silence. Then a smile, thin, pleased, dangerous. We'll draft the agreement this afternoon. And just like that, the crown jewel they thought was theirs belonged to the woman they'd ghosted, insulted, and dismissed as too back-end for front-facing discussions. By lunchtime, the contract was live. By 2:00 p.m., the company's internal Slack channels were melting. The funding evaporated first, instantly. The investor's official statement didn't even mention the company by name. Just, we've chosen to pivot to a direct licensing arrangement with the original IP holder to ensure long-term integrity and scalability. No blame, no drama, just surgical abandonment. The board scrambled. Tyler's father, who had been riding the high of a potential exit, now faced an investor exodus and a valuation freefall. The CTO quietly updated his LinkedIn with open to work. The CMO tried to book a podcast interview titled How to Handle Disruption with Grace. It was declined. And Tyler panicked. He sent me an email first, then a LinkedIn message, then a desperate text. Hey, can we talk? Things got taken out of context. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded his original termination message to his father's direct line. Subject FWD, ownership transfer update attached. A screenshot of Tyler's smiling face next to the words Dad says you're terminated. The tech belongs to us now, smiling face with sunglasses. The smug emoji was still there, frozen in time like a mosquito in amber. No edits, No commentary, just evidence. 5 minutes later, a reply came back. Not from Tyler, from his father. Just 4 words: we've made a mistake. But mistakes have consequences. This one cost them their tech, their deal, and their Golden Boy's carefully paved legacy. I closed my laptop, stood, and looked out the window. I wasn't part of their company anymore. I was the company now. They called one final meeting. Not a Zoom, not a desperate email chain. A full in-person boardroom standoff, the kind that smells like old ambition and lemon floor polish. They asked politely, too, a condemned man straightening his tie before the firing squad. The subject line read, "Clarification session urgent." I almost didn't go, but I wanted to see the whites of their eyes. I arrived 6 minutes late on purpose, walked in wearing the same cardigan Tyler once mocked, sat at the head of the table like I'd always belonged there, because I had. The room was heavy with the kind of silence that only comes from people who have already lost, but haven't admitted it yet. The CEO was there, jaw locked and eyes bloodshot. Tyler sat beside him, wrists twitching, leg bouncing, voice ready to lunge. "Margaret," he said, leaning forward like this was a hostage negotiation, "this has gone too far. You need to hand over the framework. You built it while employed here under company time. That makes it ours, your company property." He said that last part like a man trying to intimidate a lion with a leash. I didn't say a word. Instead, I lifted my wrist, tapped the screen, and let the silence break. The room filled with a voice they all knew, measured, elegant, sharp. The investor's voice, recorded and authenticated. "We only trust her." That was it. No preamble, no explanation, just 6 words. And those 6 words hit harder than any lawsuit, any bluff, any performance review they'd weaponized over the years. Tyler's mouth fell open, like the air had been knocked out of him. His father looked away, visibly crumbling. The board stared like they'd just watched the company's valuation vanish in real time. I smiled, not out of triumph, not even vengeance, just closure. Then I looked Tyler in the eye. "You're fired." He blinked. "You can't." I just did. The door behind me opened before anyone could protest. The investor's partner stepped in, crisp navy suit, folder in hand, expression unreadable. She walked past Tyler without a glance, past the CEO without a nod, and set the folder down in front of me. "Margaret," she said, "shall we sign?" I opened the folder. Read the first line. "Licensing agreement, direct architect contract." I didn't hesitate, I signed. The sound of my pen scratching paper was the only noise in the room. No one spoke. No one moved. When I stood, no one followed. I walked out of that building, the one I helped hold together for 6 years, without looking back. Let them sit there, stunned, surrounded by glass and silence, and the faint scent of their own ego collapsing. Outside, the sky had cleared. I tapped my watch once more. The screen glowed, then went still. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.